The blood had dried black against her torn calico dress, and Hannah Hayes had stopped noticing the pain 3 days ago, which meant the infection had already set in deep. She stumbled through the dusty main street of Pyramid City, Nevada, in the scorching August heat of 1878, her vision blurring at the edges as she clutched a leather satchel to her chest like it contained all the hope left in the world. The wagon train she had been traveling with had been attacked by bandits 2 weeks prior, and she had been walking ever since, her left side torn open by a bullet that had grazed her ribs, her right leg bearing a deep gash from barbed wire she had crawled through to escape. She had bound the wounds herself with strips from her petticoat, but the fabric had long since soaked through and stuck to her skin, and she knew without looking that the flesh beneath had gone bad. The saloon doors swung open ahead of her, and a tall figure emerged into the blinding sunlight. Hannah tried to keep walking, tried to hold her head high the way her mama had taught her back in St. Louis before the fever took her. But her legs gave out, and she went down hard on her knees in the middle of the street. The satchel fell from her grip, spilling its contents across the dirt. A few coins, a tintype photograph of her parents, and the deed to a small piece of land outside Sacramento that she had been traveling to claim. She heard boots approaching, fast and purposeful, and then strong hands were gripping her shoulders. "Easy now," a man's voice said, low and steady. "I have got you." Hannah tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She looked up into a face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, could make out dark eyes that held genuine concern, a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. The man was young, maybe 25 or 26, and he smelled of leather and horse and something clean like sage. "She is burning up," another voice said, and Hannah realized a small crowd had gathered. "Ethan, you better get her to Doc Morrison. Doc left yesterday for Virginia City, will not be back for a week," the man holding her said. His name was Ethan then, Ethan something. "Help me get her to my place. I can tend to her there." Hannah wanted to protest, wanted to say she did not need charity from strangers, but darkness was creeping in at the edges of her vision, and she felt herself being lifted as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. She was vaguely aware of being carried up a flight of stairs, of a door opening, of being laid down on something soft. Then consciousness left her entirely. When she woke, the light coming through the window had turned golden with late afternoon. Her dress had been removed, and she lay in a clean white nightshirt that was far too large for her. Panic seized her chest and she tried to sit up, but pain lanced through her side and she gasped. "Do not move," that same steady voice said, and Ethan appeared at her side. He was carrying a basin of steaming water, and his sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. "I know you are probably frightened, madam, but I promise you I have been nothing but respectful. Mrs. Chen from the boarding house helped me get you changed and cleaned up. She just left to fetch more supplies." Hannah studied his face in the better light. He had strong features, weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes were kind. There was a gentleness in the way he moved that seemed at odds with his rough exterior. He wore a faded blue shirt and worn denim pants, and a gun belt hung on a peg by the door. "Where am I?" she managed to croak. "My room's above the general store. I work as a ranch hand at the Lazy L outside town, but I keep these rooms for when I come into Pyramid City." He set the basin down on a small table beside the bed. "My name is Ethan Lancaster, and you are Hannah Hayes." She watched as he wrung out a cloth in the hot water. "You should not be doing this. You should not be helping me." "Why not?" "Because I cannot pay you." Ethan looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something flicker across his face that she could not quite name. "Did I ask for payment? Men always want something." Well, I suppose that is true enough in this world, he said quietly. But what I want right now is to keep you from dying of blood poisoning. Now I need to look at your wounds. I am not going to lie to you, Miss Hayes. You have let them go until they festered bad. This is going to hurt. Hannah closed her eyes and nodded. She had endured worse. She had watched her father die in a mining accident when she was 15. She had nursed her mother through yellow fever alone when she was 17. She had survived 2 weeks on the trail with infected wounds and barely any water. She could survive this. But when Ethan carefully peeled back the makeshift bandage on her side, she could not stop the scream that tore from her throat. The fabric had stuck to the wound, and removing it pulled away bits of damaged flesh. She felt tears streaming down her face and bit down hard on her lip to keep from crying out again. "I am sorry," Ethan said, and she could hear genuine anguish in his voice. "I am so sorry. I am trying to be gentle." He worked with steady hands, cleaning away the dried blood and pus, his jaw tight with concentration. Hannah focused on his face, on the small scar above his left eyebrow, on the way his dark hair curled slightly at his collar, on anything but the white-hot pain radiating from her side. She had treated wounds before, back when she had worked as a seamstress in St. Louis and sometimes helped the doctor's wife with his patients. She knew how bad infection could get. She knew she was lucky to still be alive. "The bullet went clean through," Ethan said, his voice calm and clinical. "That is good, but the wound is badly infected. I am going to have to clean it out proper and then pack it with honey and wrap it tight. Do you understand?" "Yes," Hannah whispered. "It is going to hurt worse than what I just did." "I know." Ethan reached over to the side table and picked up a bottle of whiskey. "Drink this. As much as you can stomach." Hannah took the bottle with shaking hands and drank deeply. The liquor burned going down, but she welcomed it. She drank until Ethan gently took the bottle away from her. "That should help some," he said. "Now bite down on this." He handed her a leather strap, the kind used for sharpening razors. "And try not to move." What followed was the worst pain Hannah had ever experienced in her life. Ethan poured whiskey directly into the wound to disinfect it, and she screamed into the leather strap so hard she thought her teeth would crack. Then he used a clean cloth to scrape away the dead tissue, working methodically and carefully despite her thrashing. She felt his other hand pressed firmly on her shoulder, holding her still, and she clung to the sensation of that contact like an anchor in a storm of agony. When he finally finished with her side and moved to the gash on her leg, Hannah was sobbing openly. But Ethan kept talking to her in that low, steady voice, telling her she was doing well, telling her to just hold on a little longer, telling her it was almost over. And somehow, impossibly, his words helped. By the time he finished wrapping her leg in clean bandages, darkness had fallen outside and Hannah was shaking with exhaustion. Ethan covered her carefully with a quilt and placed a cool cloth on her forehead. "You did real good," he said softly. "Now you need to rest. I will be right here if you need anything." "Why are you doing this?" Hannah asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "About 6 years ago, I got thrown from a horse out in the desert, broke my leg in 3 places, cracked some ribs. I was miles from anywhere, thought for sure I was going to die. But a Paiute man found me and took me back to his camp. He and his wife nursed me for near about 2 months until I could walk again. They did not speak much English and I did not speak their language, but they took care of me like I was their own son." He met her eyes. "I guess I figure we are all just passing through this world, and the least we can do is help each other when we can." Hannah felt fresh tears sliding down her temples. "Thank you," she whispered. "Get some sleep, Miss Hayes. We will talk more tomorrow." She woke several times during the night, fevered and disoriented. Each time, Ethan was there, helping her drink water, changing the cool cloth on her forehead, checking her bandages. Once, she woke screaming from a nightmare about the bandit attack, and he took her hand and held it until she calmed down. "You are safe here," he told her. "I promise you, you are safe." By morning, the fever had broken. Hannah woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee. She felt weak but clear-headed for the first time in days. Ethan was asleep in a chair near the bed, his head tilted back against the wall, his arms crossed over his chest. In sleep, he looked younger, the worry lines smoothed from his forehead. Hannah took the opportunity to study the room. It was small but clean, with rough wood walls and simple furnishings. A few clothes hung on pegs, a pair of well-worn boots sat by the door, and a shelf held several books, which surprised her. Most cowboys she had encountered could barely read. Ethan stirred and opened his eyes, immediately alert. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Hannah said. "Much better," he smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Good. That is real good. Are you hungry? I can bring up some food from the restaurant. I do not want to impose any more than I already have." "Miss Hayes, you are not imposing." "Now, do you want eggs or steak or both?" Despite herself, Hannah smiled. "Both sounds wonderful." While Ethan was gone, Hannah carefully examined her wounds. The bandages were clean and expertly wrapped, and when she gingerly pressed around the edges, the pain was manageable rather than excruciating. He had done a good job. A very good job. Ethan returned with 2 plates piled high with food, and Hannah ate ravenously. She had not realized how hungry she was. Between bites, she told him about the wagon train, about the attack, about her plans to claim the land in California. "You were traveling alone?" Ethan asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "I was with a family, the Johnsons. They had 5 children and needed help with the cooking and mending in exchange for passage." Hannah looked down at her plate. "They all died in the attack, all of them. I only survived because I hid under the wagon and then crawled away after dark." "I am sorry," Ethan said quietly. "That must have been terrible." "The youngest was only 3 years old," Hannah whispered. "Little Sarah. She had blonde curls and she used to follow me everywhere, calling me Hannah B like it was all one word." She felt tears burning in her eyes again and wiped them away angrily. "I am sorry. I do not usually cry this much." "You have been through hell," Ethan said. "I think you are entitled to some tears." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Hannah asked, "How did you end up in Nevada? You do not sound like you are from around here." "Kentucky originally. My family had a small farm, but after the war, things got hard. My father died at Shiloh, and my mother and sister died of cholera in '69. I headed west looking for work, ended up here about 3 years ago." He refilled her coffee cup. "The Lazy L is a good outfit. The owner, Mr. Lewis, he is fair and pays decent wages. I have been saving up to buy my own land someday." "Where would you want to settle?" Ethan looked out the window, his expression thoughtful. "Somewhere with water and good grass. Maybe up north toward Oregon or Washington Territory. Wide open spaces where a man could build something lasting." He glanced back at her. "What about you? What is in California besides that land deed?" "Hope, I suppose," Hannah said. "A fresh start. I have been working as a seamstress since I was 14, and I am good at it, but I wanted something of my own. My father won that land in a card game years ago, but never had the chance to go claim it. When my mother died, I decided it was time to stop waiting for life to happen and make it happen myself. That takes courage, or foolishness, maybe a bit of both," Ethan said with a small smile. "The best things in life usually do." Over the next week, Hannah slowly regained her strength. Ethan changed her bandages twice a day, and she could see the wounds were healing cleanly. He brought her books to read and sat with her in the evenings, and they talked about everything and nothing. She learned that he loved horses and had a gift for training even the most difficult animals. He learned that she could quote Shakespeare and had a talent for drawing, though she had not picked up a pencil in years. Mrs. Chen, the boarding house owner, visited daily and brought Hannah clean clothes and good Chinese food that she insisted would help with healing. She was a tiny woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a kind heart, and she clearly approved of Ethan. "That boy is good man," she told Hannah one afternoon while helping her wash her hair. "He helped many people in this town, never ask for nothing back." "He has certainly been kind to me," Hannah said. "He look at you special way," Mrs. Chen said with a knowing smile. "I see these things. I am old, I know." Hannah felt her cheeks flush. "We barely know each other." "Sometimes heart knows before head knows," Mrs. Chen poured clean water over Hannah's hair to rinse out the soap. "You pay attention. You see." And Hannah did see. She saw the way Ethan's hand would linger on hers when he helped her sit up. She saw the worry in his eyes when she winced from pain. She saw how he always made sure she was comfortable before he would settle into his chair for the night. And she felt something stirring in her own chest, something warm and unexpected and terrifying. By the end of the second week, Hannah was well enough to walk around the room, and Ethan brought her some proper clothes that Mrs. Chen had altered to fit her. It felt good to be dressed in something other than a nightshirt, even if she still tired easily. "I should start looking for work," Hannah said one evening as they sat by the window watching the sunset paint the desert sky in shades of orange and purple. "I cannot keep staying here indefinitely." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "What kind of work are you thinking?" "I saw a sign at the millinery shop saying they needed a seamstress. I thought I might inquire there." "And then what? You will just stay in Pyramid City?" Hannah heard something in his voice, something that made her pulse quicken. "I do not know. I suppose I could save up enough money to continue to California eventually. Or you could stay here." She turned to look at him. The dying sunlight cast shadows across his face, making it hard to read his expression. "Why would I stay here?" "Because maybe there is something here worth staying for." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "Ethan." He reached over and took her hand gently. "I know it has only been 2 weeks. I know this is probably too soon and too fast. But Hannah, I cannot stop thinking about what it will be like when you are fully healed and you leave. And I do not like how that feels." "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I have cared for a lot of wounded things in my life. Horses, cattle, even a few people. But I have never felt like this before. Like if you leave, you will be taking something of me with you." He squeezed her hand. "I am not a rich man. I do not have much to offer, but I am honest and I work hard, and I think I could make you happy if you would give me the chance." Hannah felt tears welling up again, but this time they were not from pain or grief. "I have been alone for so long," she whispered. "I do not know if I remember how to be anything else. Then we will figure it out together." Ethan brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I am not asking for an answer right now. I just needed you to know how I feel." That night, Hannah lay awake long after Ethan had fallen asleep in his chair. She thought about California, about the unknown land waiting for her there. And then she thought about Ethan, about his steady presence and kind eyes and the way he had knelt beside her wounds and dressed them with such care. She thought about Mrs. Chen's words, about hearts knowing before heads knew. And she thought about how, for the first time since her parents died, she did not feel alone. The next morning she told him she wanted to stay. Ethan's face lit up with a joy so pure it made Hannah's heart ache. "Are you sure? I do not want you to give up your dreams for me." "I am not giving them up," Hannah said. "I am just changing them, and maybe they will be even better this way." He crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms, careful not to press against her still healing wounds. Hannah buried her face in his chest and breathed in the scent of him, of sage and leather and safety. "I will make you happy," he murmured into her hair. "I swear I will spend every day trying to make you happy." "You already do," she said. They took things slow, courting properly despite living in the same small room. Ethan moved a screen so Hannah could have privacy, and he never touched her with anything but the utmost respect. He brought her wildflowers from the desert and took her on slow walks around town as she regained her strength. He introduced her to Mr. Lewis, the ranch owner, and to the other cowboys who worked the Lazy L. They were a rough bunch, but they treated Hannah with surprising gentleness, tipping their hats and speaking politely whenever they saw her. Hannah took the job at the millinery shop, and the owner, a widow named Mrs. Pritchard, was delighted to have someone with her skills. The work was satisfying, and Hannah enjoyed creating beautiful things again. She made enough money to pay Ethan back for all the supplies he had bought for her care, though he protested at first. "You saved my life," she told him firmly. "The least I can do is pay for the bandages." "You do not owe me anything, Hannah." "I know I do not owe you, but I want to contribute. We are partners, are we not?" Ethan smiled at that word, partners. "Yes, I suppose we are." 3 months after he had first carried her up those stairs, Ethan took Hannah out to the Lazy L Ranch and showed her his favorite spot. A small rise overlooking a valley where wild horses sometimes gathered. They sat together on a blanket and watched the sun set, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "I love you," Ethan said suddenly. "I know I probably should have worked up to it more romantic-like, but I have never been good with fancy words. I just love you, Hannah Hayes. I love your strength and your courage and the way you hum while you are sewing. I love how you are kind to everyone you meet, even though you have every reason to be bitter. I love the way you look at the world like you are still finding beauty in it despite everything. I just love you." Hannah turned in his arms so she could see his face. "I love you too," she said, and saying the words felt like coming home. "I loved you when you knelt beside me in the street and did not look away even though I was filthy and bleeding. I loved you when you held my hand through the pain. I loved you when you read to me even though you were exhausted from working all day. I love you, Ethan Lancaster, and I cannot imagine my life without you anymore." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. And Hannah kissed him back, pouring all her gratitude and hope and love into that single perfect moment. They were married in November, a small ceremony at the church in Pyramid City with Mrs. Chen, and the ranch hands as witnesses. Hannah wore a dress she had made herself, pale blue with white lace, and Ethan wore his best suit and looked so handsome it made her breath catch. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Ethan kissed her, the cowboys whooped and hollered until Mrs. Chen shushed them. Mr. Lewis gave them a small house on the ranch property as a wedding gift, a 2-room cabin with a stone fireplace and a view of the mountains. It was not much, but to Hannah, it was a palace. She filled it with curtains she sewed and rugs she bargained for at the general store, and Ethan built her a proper sewing table where she could work on her projects. They spent their first night as husband and wife tangled together in their marriage bed, learning each other's bodies with gentle hands and whispered endearments. "Are your wounds still tender?" Ethan asked, running his fingers lightly over the scars on her side and leg. "Not anymore," Hannah said. "You healed me, Ethan, completely." "We healed each other," he said, and kissed each scar like a benediction. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Ethan worked long days on the ranch, breaking horses and mending fences and doing all the hard work that kept a cattle operation running. Hannah continued at the millinery shop 3 days a week and took on private sewing commissions the other days, building a reputation as the best seamstress in 3 counties. They saved their money carefully, still dreaming of buying their own land someday. The first winter was harsh, with storms that dumped snow across the desert and winds that howled through the canyon walls. But their little cabin stayed warm, and Hannah found she did not mind being snowed in with Ethan. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other or just talking, and sometimes they would dance around the small room to music only they could hear. In the spring, Hannah discovered she was pregnant. She told Ethan over breakfast, watching nervously for his reaction. His face went through a dozen emotions in the space of a heartbeat: surprise, joy, fear, wonder. Then he was on his feet and pulling her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, like he could not quite believe it. "Hannah, we are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" she asked, even though she could see that he was. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," he said, kneeling down and pressing his forehead gently against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your pa. I already love you more than I thought possible." Hannah ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. She had been so alone for so long, and now she had this: a husband who loved her, a child growing inside her, a home of their own. It felt like a miracle. The pregnancy was not easy. Hannah was sick for the first 4 months, barely able to keep anything down. Ethan fussed over her constantly, bringing her ginger tea and crackers, rubbing her back when the nausea got bad. Mrs. Chen came by regularly with soups and remedies that actually helped, and Mrs. Pritchard was understanding about Hannah needing to reduce her hours at the shop. By summer, the sickness had passed, and Hannah bloomed. Her belly grew round and firm, and she felt the baby moving inside her like fluttering wings. Ethan would spend hours with his hand on her stomach, marveling at every kick and roll. "Do you think it is a boy or a girl?" he asked one night as they lay in bed. "I do not know," Hannah said. "What do you hope for?" "I hope for healthy," Ethan said firmly. "Boy or girl does not matter as long as you are both safe." "But if you had to choose," he thought about it, "I think maybe a boy first, so he can help protect any brothers or sisters that come after. And if it is a girl, then I will love her just as much and teach her to shoot straight and ride fast so she can protect herself." He kissed Hannah's temple. "I grew up with a sister. Girls are tough in ways boys are not." "I want at least 3 children," Hannah said. "I was so lonely as an only child, especially after my parents died." "3 sounds good," Ethan agreed. "Though we should probably see how this first one goes before we plan too far ahead." Hannah went into labor on a cold October night, 3 weeks earlier than they had expected. Ethan rode through the darkness to fetch Mrs. Chen while Mrs. Pritchard stayed with Hannah, timing her contractions. By the time Ethan returned with Mrs. Chen and the midwife, Hannah was gripping the bed frame and breathing through the pain. "I am right here," Ethan said, taking her hand. "I am not going anywhere." "You should wait outside," the midwife said. "This is women's work." "No," Hannah gasped. "I want him here, please." The midwife looked like she wanted to argue, but Mrs. Chen said something sharp in Chinese and the woman subsided. So Ethan stayed, holding Hannah's hand and wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, and telling her she was doing wonderfully even when she screamed and cursed him for getting her pregnant in the first place. The labor lasted 14 hours, and by the end, Hannah was exhausted and terrified. But then the midwife was saying, "One more push, that is it." And Hannah bore down with everything she had left, and suddenly there was a thin, wailing cry filling the room. "It is a boy," the midwife announced, holding up a tiny, red, furious-looking infant. "A big, healthy boy." Ethan was crying openly as the midwife cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket. When she placed him in Hannah's arms, Hannah felt like her heart was going to explode. He was perfect, with dark hair like his father and tiny fists that waved at the air. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Ethan knelt beside the bed, running one finger along the baby's cheek. "He is beautiful, Hannah, just like his mother." They named him Elijah Thomas Lancaster, and he became the center of their universe. Ethan was a devoted father, walking the floor with Elijah when he cried in the night, changing diapers without complaint, singing off-key lullabies that somehow always worked. Hannah had never seen him so happy. When Elijah was 6 months old, Mr. Lewis called Ethan into his office at the main ranch house. Hannah waited anxiously at home, nursing the baby and trying not to worry. When Ethan finally returned, he had a strange expression on his face. "What happened?" Hannah asked immediately. "Are you fired?" "What? No, nothing like that." Ethan sat down heavily in his chair. "Mr. Lewis wants to retire. His arthritis has gotten too bad for him to keep running the ranch. He is selling the Lazy L." Hannah's heart sank. "Where will we go?" "That is the thing." Ethan looked up at her, his eyes bright. "He wants to sell it to me, to us." "What?" "Ethan, we do not have that kind of money." "He knows that. He is offering to sell it to me for a fair price with payments over 20 years. He said I have been like a son to him, and he wants to know the ranch is in good hands." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "Hannah, he is giving us our dream. The land, the house, the cattle, everything. We would be ranchers. We would own something." Hannah stared at him, Elijah forgotten at her breast. "Can we do it? Can we really do it? It will be hard work, harder than anything we have done before. The payments will be tight some months, and we will have to build the herd back up because he is taking some of the cattle with him to sell off. But I think we can make it work, if you are willing." "If I am willing," Hannah laughed, and there were tears in her eyes. "Ethan, yes, of course yes." They signed the papers a month later, and just like that, they were ranchers. Mr. Lewis moved to San Francisco to live with his daughter, and Ethan and Hannah took over the operation of the Lazy L. It was grueling work, even harder than Ethan had predicted. They were up before dawn every day, working until long after dark. Hannah learned to ride well, to rope cattle, to mend fences and doctor sick animals. She still sewed when she could, taking commissions that brought in extra money they desperately needed, but they were happy. Bone tired and stressed about money sometimes, but happy. They were building something together, something that would last, something they could pass on to Elijah and whatever other children came after. When Elijah was 2, Hannah got pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy was easier. She worked right up until her water broke, helping Ethan move cattle from one pasture to another. Their second son, Marcus James Lancaster, was born on a warm May evening with much less drama than his brother. He was smaller and quieter than Elijah had been, with Hannah's green eyes and a serious expression that made everyone laugh. "2 boys," Ethan said, cradling Marcus while Elijah climbed on the bed to see his new brother. "We are outnumbered, Hannah." "Good thing I know how to handle cowboys," Hannah said with a tired smile. Life got even busier with 2 little ones, but they managed. The ranch was slowly becoming profitable, and they were able to hire 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Ethan proved to have his father's head for business, and he made smart decisions about breeding and selling that kept them afloat even in tough years. When Marcus was 18 months old, Hannah found herself pregnant for a 3rd time. She was 31 now, and this pregnancy was harder than the others. She tired more easily, and her back ached constantly. But she kept working, kept moving forward, because that was what you did. Their daughter, Grace Elizabeth Lancaster, was born on a snowy December night in 1886. She came fast and fierce, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. From the moment she arrived, she had both her father and her brothers wrapped around her tiny finger. "We have our three," Ethan said, holding Grace while Hannah rested. Elijah and Marcus were asleep in their beds, exhausted from all the excitement. "Our family is complete." "It is perfect," Hannah agreed. "Absolutely perfect." The years rolled by in a blur of branding seasons and school lessons, of birthday parties and Christmas mornings, of hard work and deep contentment. Elijah grew tall and serious like his father, with a gift for training horses. Marcus was the scholar, always with his nose in a book, dreaming of becoming a lawyer someday. And Grace was pure wildfire, refusing to be left out of anything her brothers did, learning to ride and rope as well as any boy. Hannah's hair started showing gray at the temples, and Ethan's face grew more lined, but they still looked at each other with the same love they had felt that first evening watching the sunset together. On their 15th anniversary, Ethan gave her a locket with tiny photographs of their three children inside. "So you can always keep them close to your heart," he said. "They are always close to my heart," Hannah said, touching the locket. "But so are you. You are the one who saved me, Ethan. Not just my life, but everything that came after. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose. You gave me love. You saved me right back," Ethan said, pulling her close. "I was just going through the motions before you came along. You made me want to build something, to be something more than just a drifter working for wages. You made me whole." That summer, Marcus announced he had been accepted to study law in San Francisco. He was 19 years old and ready to make his own way in the world. Hannah cried when he left, but they were proud tears. Ethan had worked extra jobs to save enough money for Marcus's tuition, and seeing their son follow his dreams made every sacrifice worthwhile. Elijah stayed on the ranch, taking over more and more of the daily operations as Ethan's knees started to give him trouble. At 21, he was a man grown, strong and capable, and he brought home a sweet girl named Rebecca from town. They married the following spring, and Hannah gained the daughter-in-law she had always hoped for. Grace, at 17, was still deciding what she wanted. She loved the ranch but also talked about becoming a teacher or maybe even a doctor. The world was changing, opening up new possibilities for women, and Hannah encouraged her to consider all her options. "You can be anything you want," she told Grace. "Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." "Even a rancher?" Grace asked. "Especially a rancher," Hannah said. "This land will belong to you and your brothers someday. You have just as much right to it as they do." On a warm evening in early September 1896, Ethan and Hannah sat on the porch of their house watching the sun set over the land they had built together. They were both in their 50s now, their hands rough with work, their faces weathered by years in the sun. But when Ethan reached over and took Hannah's hand, she felt the same flutter in her chest that she had felt 18 years ago. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had just walked past you that day?" Ethan asked. "If I had not stopped to help?" "Never," Hannah said firmly. "Because you would never do that. Helping people is who you are, Ethan. It is your nature." "Maybe. But I am especially glad I helped you." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. In the distance, they could hear Elijah and Rebecca laughing and Grace singing as she brought the horses in for the night. Their family, their legacy, their life. "I love you," Ethan said quietly. "Just as much today as I did the first time I said it. More even." "I love you too," Hannah said. "Thank you for kneeling beside my wounds all those years ago." Thank you for seeing past the blood and the fear and choosing to care. Thank you for giving me this life. Thank you for staying, Ethan said. Thank you for choosing me. As the last light faded from the sky, they remained on the porch, hand in hand, surrounded by everything they had built from nothing but love and determination. Hannah thought back to that desperate girl stumbling through the streets of Pyramid City, half dead from infection and loss. She had let her wounds fester because she had not known how to ask for help, had not believed she deserved it. But Ethan had knelt beside her anyway. He had dressed her wounds with care, with gentleness, with love. And in healing her body, he had somehow healed her heart too. Years later, when Hannah was an old woman with white hair and grandchildren playing at her feet, she would tell them the story of how she met their grandfather. She would tell them about the pain and the fear, about the kindness of strangers, about wounds that had festered and the man who had healed them. And she would tell them the most important lesson she had learned, that sometimes salvation comes not from going it alone, but from accepting help when it is offered, from letting someone care for you when you are too wounded to care for yourself. Ethan lived to be 78, still working the ranch until the very end despite his failing health. When he finally passed in his sleep on a quiet January night in 1923, Hannah held his hand and whispered thank you one last time. She lived another 7 years after that, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the matriarch of a family that sprawled across 3 states. But until the day she died, she wore that locket he had given her, kept close to her heart. And she kept the small scars on her side and leg too, faded now to pale silver lines. They were a reminder of where she had been, of how far she had come, of the day she had collapsed in the street and a cowboy had stopped to help, of the moment everything had changed, of the moment her life had truly begun.